Thank you very much, Desiree, for leading us in rendering the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to call to the podium our DVC Teaching and Learning, Professor Richard Madaje, to do an opening welcome. Over to you, sir.
Program Director, Prof. Sitole, without any doubt, there is sufficient proof that our students are capable. We all enjoyed Desiree leading us in the national anthem. Can we once again give a big round of applause? Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Mokgalong, our esteemed guests for today, Professor Badat, and also one of my teachers long ago. I won't mention the year lest I reveal my age. Professor Changyon, who is seated here in front with blonde hair. Members of executive management, embracing the deanery, directors of school, heads of department, and the directors of support divisions like quality assurance, academics, and support staff, members of the SRC, and students in general, honorable guests from various institutions and organizations, all protocol observed. Abshin, Tobel, good morning. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Mokgalong, I wish to extend a warm word of welcome to all the dignitaries, participants, discussants for today's program in the executive dialogue. And of course, academics among our midst, and more importantly, students who are our future. And of course, a special word of welcome is extended to Professor Badat, who is a renowned scholar who has served, among others, in many capacities, such as Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University, Chief Executive Officer of Council on Higher Education, a very important council which gives us accreditation to offer our programs, and is currently research professor in the Department of History at the University of the Free State. We all look forward to listening to his presentation. To all the guests and members of the audience present here today, thank you very much for your attendance. It is indeed highly appreciated that you are going to be part of the discussion today, and your input will also be highly appreciated. Program Director, we often take heritage and history for granted. Yet, we are who we are today because of our heritage and history. Furthermore, heritage and history teaches us to avoid mistakes of the past. It is thus very important that we take our heritage and history seriously, because without these two aspects, we are nobody, we are nothing. As George Santayana advises, those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. Presenters and discussants today will help us to understand better the significance of heritage and history. With these few words, Program Director, once again, all of you feel welcome, and we look forward to a fruitful and very successful dialogue. I thank you.
Thank you very much, DVC. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give the DVC another round of applause. And just to let you know that our ablution facilities are on the eastern side of the building, for those who may be visiting this building for the first time. And we hope you will enjoy the program. And also want to take this opportunity to welcome our audience online. We hope they will also participate meaningfully in the program. Our next item is item number 3, and that is the context, the need and importance of documenting and preserving institutional history. And that item will be executed by Prof. Chicha Twala. Professor Twala, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
When Desiree was singing, it reminded me of what happened in 1979 when I was in a school choir. We were supposed to go and perform singing wise in Belfontein in the Free State. And the choir master came to us one by one, listening to us. And then thereafter he said, Twala, we'll call you next time. And the implication was, Twala, you are not good enough to can accompany us to go to Belfontein. But fortunately, they didn't win. Because my voice was missing. Colleagues, some institutions are making noise about their successes, and they are making noise about their history. And we hope, as the University of Limpopo, that we should document what is of historical significance to us and what is of heritage significance. The project itself that we are unpacking today, it is an institutional project. It is not a faculty-based project, because the history of UL, it is the history of the apartheid government was actually saying that now black people want to go and study at tertiary institutions. For we need to come with a strategy of a divide and rule and say, where can they go and study? Because to go to Wits, then you had to get a permission from the Minister of Bantu Education to enroll as a black person. Therefore, the government came with universities such as the University College of the North then. But it is important that when we are documenting this kind of history, we need to conjure into our minds the basics of documenting history, to avoid what Terence Ranger calls romanticization of history. We need not to romanticize history, but we must document history as is and call a spade and not an implement for manual labor. When we talk about the institution like UL, for an example, we need to go back and verify information that is at our disposal. We need to go back and check in our archives what is that is there in our archives that can be useful for us in documenting this history. Archival information and archival material is important when you are writing history. I remember 21 years ago, I wrote an article and I went to an archive in Bloemfontein because I was writing about Thomas Mapikela, who was the first speaker of the ANC from 1912, and he spent 27 years as the speaker of the ANC. I was writing an article about his house, which was the only double-story house in Batu location in Bloemfontein then. I wanted to know, why is that a double-story house? Why was a black person given that permission to build a double-story house? When I was digging from the people being removed from Vryhoek to Batu location, which was established in the mid-1920s, I found that Mapikela had 2 houses in Vryhoek. And when Vryhoek was demolished, he was not allowed to have 2 houses in Batu location, but was allowed to build a house on top of another. And that is how it is a double-story house. But when I was digging further, and because people would be traveling from Cape Town, passing Bloemfontein to Johannesburg by train, but for black people, there were no guest houses by then. Therefore, black people would be housed in the station, and then Mapikela applied to the then superintendent in Bloemfontein to have his house converted into a guest house. But guess what? The application was rejected because the guest house didn't have a toilet inside. The toilet was outside. When I went to the archive and looked at the documents, I found a document which was written on the 23rd of January 1909, whereby Mapikela was asking for the house to be converted. But, a big part for that matter, as an archival historian, I looked at the texture of the paper. That this paper was not there in 1909. The kind of the paper, the texture of the paper showed that no paper like that was used in 1909. I looked at the pen that was used in writing that letter. I could tell that then they were using fountain pens or feather pens. In no way that it could have been written in that kind of a pen. And that simply said to me, this is a falsified document. Although this document is found from the archive, but it is a it is a falsified document. Therefore, when we are embarking on this journey, we need to look at some of information that is falsified. Sometimes when you embark on this journey, you'll go and interview people who were there. Sometimes people are exaggerating their role. A person would say, I was a student leader here, but when you go and verify that information, you find that the person was not leading, was following. Therefore, that is important for us colleagues. And then I did some background check on UL. I found information that from 1959 to 1960, the administrative staff here, it was Potgieter, who was the rector, Rechter, who was the registrar, Menges, who was the accountant, and Kutsie, who was the typist. For the whole institution, there were 4 people who were in the administration. From 1960 in 1960, there were 22 staff members, of which 5 were only black, and 15 departments. In 1969, there were 27 black lecturers at God and we need to
Okay. Dumelang, Sanibonani, Mulweni, and thank you for having me here this morning. And I'm very excited by the number of people I'm seeing, that they're not, they're also the young people. So that I'm very excited about. And thank you to the Vice Chancellor for facilitating this executive dialogue. And I'll spend about 20 minutes. Usually I don't use PowerPoint. I like to just speak. But I think it's appropriate to use the PowerPoint to be able to illustrate some things to you about what we are talking about. And then I'm going to try and keep it short because I would like to use as much time as possible for discussion and engagement and so on, rather than just listen to me. So in a sense, this title captures what I'm going to speak about. It's an executive dialogue on institutional heritage and relevance. And what I want to contribute is about advancing institutional heritage through a research project on a critical institutional history of the University of Limpopo. And I want to emphasize critical because the opposite of critical is what you call hagiography. The beautiful university that's done nothing wrong, right? Now, you know, university histories are very contested. UCT likes to say that it started in 1829. That's rubbish. It's a lie. But why do people like to say they go back so far? Because they think prestige is attached to age. So Harvard likes to think it's the greatest because it's from the 1500s. Right? And we are constantly told that Bologna is from the 11th century, and Cambridge, and so on. Right? When we are told those things, in the way UCT does too, because what started in 1829 was a primary school called Sachs. The only time UCT moved over
to being only higher education was in the 1890s or even early 1900s. Actually, Stellenbosch University is older than, if you do your research. So I want to come back to, institutions like to say how old they are. And we are constantly told that our universities come from where? Europe, from Bologna. No one wants to talk about the fact that there was a university in India in the 4th century. No one wants to speak about the fact there was a university in Morocco from the 9th century, when Europe didn't exist, and when Europe was in the Dark Ages. It was not the Dark Ages elsewhere in the world. There was no Dark Ages in China at that time, or in the Islamic world at that time. The Dark Ages was in Europe. So I'm starting there because histories are contested. Heritage is contested. And there are people still today, as part of Eurocentrism, the idea that all knowledge comes from the North, and that we in the South are culture. We don't think theoretically. Only the people in the North think theoretically and so on. Right? So that what we are busy with must be understood as part of a more bigger project of reclaiming, recovering. Because we should be sick and tired of people telling us that you people don't matter really when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to heritage, when it comes to history. Leave it to us in the North. The North means leave it to us, whites. Because you black people should do other things. Right? It's a variation of what Verwoerd was telling us in the 1950s, that we are still being told today from the North. Right? So let me start by just giving you a quick outline. It's not going to be very long. I'm going to go through it quite fast. I want to speak about institutional heritage and relevance. I want to speak about universities as institutions. And when I speak about that, think about what I'm saying and whether that applies to the North, and I'd be surprised if it doesn't apply to the North and Limpopo. I want to say something about heritage very quickly, and like my colleague, Professor Twala says, heritage is not a dead thing, eh? Heritage is a living thing. We decide on what is heritage. Not every aspect of history is heritage. We create heritage. And we also get rid of some heritage if it's sexist and patriarchal and so on. We must also have the courage to get rid of some aspects of heritage, or what we call culture and traditions. Right? And then I want to speak about this project. It's a national project, and what it could look like at Limpopo. Okay, so let's see how we get. Okay, so I really want to connect institutional heritage and relevance to the University of Limpopo, going back to the University College of the North, 1959, and then the University of the North, 1969, 1970. We need to understand the history of this institution. It didn't arise as Limpopo. It starts out as a university college under the auspices of UNISA. All the curriculum and so on was UNISA curriculum. And then you have to ask questions about that curriculum, or what it was meant to be teaching us. Right? Okay, so let me say a few words quickly about universities as institutions. Because universities are also organizations. And so what I'm presenting here is, if you like, what we would call a conceptual framework about how to think of universities. Are universities institutions? Are universities organizations? What are universities? Now this is where you have to theorize, not just describe. And if you don't have a conceptual framework, what are you busy with? Concepts are important. Theories are important. You can't get to the empirical data about this university unless you have theory and concepts, because that guides you in terms of what to look at. Otherwise, there's too much to look at. Okay? So, important, universities are institutions. They exist in time. 2024, 1959. They exist in space, and they exist in place. Because we are at the southern tip of Africa, right? We're in South Africa. We're not in Europe somewhere. So place is very important. That's why we speak about a critical pedagogy of place. Our curriculum should be shaped by place. The curriculum here should look a bit different from UCT, because UCT is in Cape Town and in the Western Cape, which thinks it's different from all of us. This institution is in the north, in Limpopo. Place must shape the curriculum to some extent, otherwise how does it resonate amongst the people who are attending here? You can't use the same curriculum at Harvard and Oxford and use it here. They can keep their curriculum because it's for Americans, it's not for us. So universities have particular developmental trajectories. The trajectory of this institution is different from Durban Westville, is different from Rhodes. They have cultures. You know about that. We want to find out more about the culture of this institution and its cultures and traditions and so on. Universities have values, right? You have traditions, you have certain norms, you have rituals. This is a bit of a ritual too. Executive dialogue. Our graduation ceremonies are rituals. I hope you don't wear the 10-kilogram gown that I used to wear every year. I hated that gown. We tried to change it. We asked the Kaiskama Hook people to give us thin, light Eastern Cape gowns, because the gowns we were wearing came from Oxford, where it's cold. Can you imagine me wearing that for 5 graduation ceremonies in the heat of summer? You see, little thing, we're laughing at it, right? But look how it's carrying on. How are we reproducing that without even thinking about that? Why do we wear those gowns? Why do we make people wear those things? Can't we come up with something more creative? And those gowns, by the way, that Oxford and Cambridge wear, do you know where they come from? Not from them. They come from the Islamic world. From Baghdad and those places. So next time you think Oxford, Cambridge gave us those gowns, they didn't give us the gowns, they stole those gowns from somewhere else. Because there was no Oxford and Cambridge then. They only came in the 14th century. Okay? Of course, we are also as complex systems of established and embedded rules. I don't have to tell you about rules, right? Everything runs by rules here. And they have to some extent. And we are not just complex systems. At the end of the day, we are constituted by people, by ideas, by values, by policies, processes, procedures, practices, and so on and so on. Right? And our universities, and this university, and Rhodes and everyone, they have a certain kind of structure. And they constrain our behavior. We can't just behave however we want. Not even the Vice-Chancellor can just behave however she or he wants, as they learn when they are not Vice-Chancellors anymore, that you can't just behave however you want. Right? So, but if they structure our behavior and constrain our behavior, they also enable actions and practices and so on. We need to understand we are regulated by those things. We're not just free from those things. This is Sociology 101, structure and agency, structure and action, right? Our universities serve diverse purposes. What is the purpose of this university? They undertake specific functions. What are its functions? They play various roles. What are its roles? And they have a variety of goals, which we normally put in mission statements and all that. So, why do I use different words? Because all those words are different. Purposes, functions, roles, and goals. I'm not repeating myself. I'm not conflating those 4 concepts. Each one is a concept. So what do we mean by purpose? What do we mean by functions? What do we mean by roles? What do we mean by goals? See the sociologist in me. We work with concepts. And those concepts are located in theories, and we use that to interpret the world, to interpret the University of Limpopo. And these institutions are outcomes, either conscious or without you being aware of it. They are the actions of humans, us. We make these institutions. And we can change these institutions if we want to, for the better. And some of it is the outcomes of deliberate political strategies and political conflicts. So you cannot understand the 1959 Extension of University Act that Professor Twala mentioned without understanding something else. The rise of apartheid in 1948, the Bantu Authorities Act in 1951, the promotion of Bantustan self-government in 1959, all those are linked to the Extension of University Act. I'm tempted to say something naughty here, but I won't. No, let me say it. Yeah. You see, this is often the difference, with due respect. And I've taught all my life in an education faculty, not in a sociology department. Many students who are doing education, even at postgraduate level, will only deal with the Extension of University Act of 1959. But if they were in a history department or in a sociology department, they'll learn about the Bantu Authorities Act of 1951, the promotion of self-government, because they will see the connections between the politics and the political economy and the institution. You cannot understand an institution just in terms of an act that sets up universities. I don't know if any of you are cricket fans, but the famous scholar C.L.R. James from the Caribbean says, "What do they of cricket know who only cricket know? What do they of universities know who only universities know?" Nothing, to be honest, because you don't understand the political economy of universities and what shapes universities powerfully and so on, right? Another point, think about this for North. Many institutions tend to be what we call path dependent. Once you adopt a certain path, it's very hard to move out of that path, right? What 59 did and the creation of the University College of North set you on a particular path. It's not that you haven't tried to get out of that path, and you have gotten out of that. But I think we have to come back critically and interrogate how far you've been able to move from that path that was designed in 1959. And I don't say that lightly, because it's very difficult. Very difficult. It's not just about leadership and who's the vice chancellor. Because this institution was never set up to be a research university. And let's be honest, you're still not a research university. Because to become a research university takes an incredible. It's not just money. You don't build research cultures with money. It takes something else. So certain universities in this country, right from the outset, were set up on a certain trajectory. Rhodes, UCT, WITS. The great example is Rao, today UJ, which wants to boast all the time about being the top in the country and all that. It can only do those things because it was set up on a different basis from this institution. And that's why it had 2.8 billion in reserves. Probably now 10 billion. Can do a lot with that. But VC at UJ must never forget where they come from and where all that money comes from. Because that library at Rao, which was created in 1968, within a few years had more books than all the historically black universities put together. Path dependent, right? And then the last point is the choices that we make early in our history also set us on a certain path. Very hard to get away from that. I can speak about Rhodes because I spent 8 years there, about the culture and things like that. If you ask me as a vice chancellor, and I've said it often at Rhodes, this is a largely racist, colonial, English speaking, blah, blah, blah. Not today, but it was still that when I joined it as the first black vice chancellor. So those early histories are not easy to get away from. Right, so let me quickly say something about heritage. Heritage is not about the past alone. It's not just about preservation. Heritage is a living matter. We draw on what we think is heritage. We make choices that this is our heritage and not that. No one's making those choices, not falling from heaven on our heads as heritage. We create and make heritage. And as part of that heritage, we also decide what we want to reproduce and carry on and what we want to jettison, I hope. So at Rhodes, you have to jettison a whole lot of things. Because Rhodes imagined that I was coming there and black students were coming there to be assimilated into a white culture. And we had to say to them, forget it. Not coming to be assimilated, coming to transform this culture. Get another vice chancellor if you want to assimilate me. Okay? That was a big issue during the interview. My referee, Khotso Mokgalong, said, Saleem is ready for Rhodes. Are you ready for Saleem? He knows what he was talking about. Because I worked with Khotso a lot and Saki Makazoma. They were my referees. That's what they said to Rhodes. Don't appoint Saleem if you're not ready. Okay? So we need to engage critically with our manifold heritages, because the heritage is not one. It's many different things that we have inherited. But if you really want to know our heritages, how can you do it without having a knowledge of this institution? Knowledge, eh? Not what we think we have. Not anecdotes. Not stories. They're all important. But knowledge. Because that's what a university is about. It's about knowledge. That's why it's not an FET college. That's why it's not a high school. Right? And if you want that knowledge, then we need to do research. Because knowledge is not going to fall on your head all the time. You need to put in the effort, like Professor Twala was putting in the effort to go into the archives and being able to say, this is not a valid document. Right? Heritage, you need knowledge, you need research. And why is it linked to institutional relevance? Because if you do not focus on your heritage and if you do not focus on the knowledge of your institution, then how do you stay relevant? Then you're going to become what Dahrendorf speaks about. Stagnant, expensive monuments to the past that contribute very little to society. You need to know your institution if you're going to be relevant. You need to have a deep sense of your institution about what's possible, what's not possible, and so on. And so constant change means we must constantly, continuously interrogate our purposes, our functions, our roles, because otherwise we'll become stagnant. Right? And the last point I want to make, heritage, culture, and traditions can also ossify. They can get hard. And then they become a real brake on us. Right? They bring about all blind spots. We don't see a whole lot of things because we're ossifying our heritage, culture, and traditions. The best way to explain that is our views of women. A lot of us have been ossified. We have blind spots about women because we are steeped in patriarchy. We are steeped in sexism, and we don't recognize that and how it plays itself out all the time to the detriment of women. One of the things I learned in the first 6 months of walking around Rhodes is this, I was constantly be told, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Until I said in 2006 at the final sentence, I'm going to shout if any of you tell me it ain't broken. Because things are badly broken when you look at it from the perspective of women and black people at Rhodes. All you people who are telling me it ain't broken are white. Because it's so comfortable for you, but it's not comfortable for black people and women. So stop talking about it ain't broken. And in any case, can't we do better? Surely we can do better. Okay. So we need traditions. Of course we need traditions and so on. But we need traditions that let us grow, let us develop, that don't hold us back. Right. Okay, so let me tell you quickly about the research project on the histories of universities in South Africa. So I am working, a book will come out next year on the history of universities in South Africa during the colonial, segregation, apartheid, post-94 period. It's more the history of the idea of the university in South Africa. Where do universities come from in South Africa? Whose ideas are these that we have simply embraced for many hundreds of years? Our universities are all products of colonial thinking and segregation and apartheid. We only created 2 universities post-1994, Solplaki and Mpumalanga. Even they might be still infected by Eurocentrism and colonial ideas and so on. Okay? So I argue, and the point of departure for this project is that there are universities in South Africa, but they are not South African universities and African universities. They are pale imitations of Europe. And it's time for us to have the courage to build South African and African universities. Europe can have its universities. That doesn't mean we're not going to cooperate with them and so on. It doesn't mean we're not going to go to conferences and so on. But it's not a nice thing simply being a university in South Africa. So that's the big decolonizing project. Do we stay as we are for the rest of our lives, or do we actually have the courage to change? And I mean change fundamentally, not change names only and stuff, right? So those are the projects. I'm working on that. There's a book on the old University of Durban, Westville, that will come out either the end of this year or early next year by edited collection by me and Ghulam Vahed. I have my postdoc working on a University of Zululand history, hopefully next year. I have my PhD working on Limpopo right now. Hopefully he'll graduate mid-next year. Rietelo Moncho from Soweto. Professor Albert Krunling is working on a proper history of Stellenbosch, not the 100th anniversary one from last year. Right? They have their places, the anniversary ones, but we're not talking about that. We have Pretoria Bronwyn-Stradum carrying on her PhD studies. UFS, we've just started the project. DUT, we have a postdoc working on that. And then Anne Heffernan, you may know her here, she comes to do research here, is working on historically black universities. So we have a national working group, myself, Professor Paul Malem from Rhodes, Luvoyo Wachela from Forte, and others. So, let me come to the more exciting part for me. A critical institutional history of the University of Limpopo. So, let's talk about the what. What are we talking about? We're talking about critical. We're talking about institutional. And we're talking about history. But doesn't mean history is only about history. You can bring sociology into it, you can bring politics into it, you can bring anthropology into it, and so on. So if we want critical reflections, what do we want to critically reflect on? Well, we want to reflect on the University of Limpopo's location. Rural, 1950s, turf loop. Place and space. We want to reflect on its character, its role that it has played over the last 60 odd years, and its significance. We want to ask questions about learning and teaching at Limpopo, because learning and teaching, research and community engagement are the 3 core purposes of a university. So, what happens in learning and teaching at this institution? Are we not interested in that? What happens as far as research is concerned? How much research happens here? What kinds of research? What are you strong in? I don't know if today, but I know when I was at the CHE, life sciences was strong here. Microbiology is strong at Venda, I was there last year. Community engagement, what happens here? How do you define community engagement? Who are your communities? Curriculum and pedagogy. What is your curriculum about? How does your curriculum in history compare with the curriculum at Stellenbosch or Rhodes or Free State? And in all your areas, why does your curriculum look like that? Or are you just taking from UCT and teaching the same thing? Language. Why are you still teaching in English? Why are we not teaching in Swana? Or Pedi or Sutu? Am I joking? That's part of becoming South African universities and African universities. If we had started in 1994, maybe we would be 30 years down the line now. But we didn't have the courage, even though we advised the minister on this. We said it's not a matter of taking Afrikaans away, it's a matter of introducing Xhosa and Sotho and Swana into the universities and start in particular disciplines. There's never been support. The documents I can show you for that, because I was a convener of those task teams. What are the histories of disciplines and fields? Every one of you who is an academic here is in a certain department. What is the history of history at this institution? What is the history of microbiology at this institution? What is the history of the department of whatever you want to call it at this institution? Are we not interested in those questions? We should be. We should know where our disciplines come from and what are shaping it and things like that. What is the histories of faculties here or departments? How did they come about? We got the statistic, how many? Few departments in 59. How did they decide that's the next department? This is the next department. Are we not interested in that? How did it happen? How does North come to look, Limpopo come to look the way it does? We want to know about institutional culture. Every university has a culture. And many cultures are raced, they are sexed, they are gendered, and so on. What is the culture here? What is equity all about at this institution? Or is there no equity issue at this institution? Only at white universities there are equity issues. I think there are big equity issues at the University of Western Cape, which I know best after Rhodes. They don't want to recognize that. They think they don't have to transform. That institution needs to transform, UWC. Because there's a certain mentality that pervades it. Let me say what it is. It's called coloredism. Colored chauvinism. You cannot understand what's happening at the vice-chancellor levels and the fights happening unless you understand the colored chauvinism in that place. Let's be honest about these things. Because it's never had a non-colored vice-chancellor. And they've just appointed the first one this year, and 2 women who applied think it's their post because they happen to be colored. Can we talk about those things? It's part of the institutional culture. Brian O'Connell was a fabulous vice-chancellor. Small blind spot about the colored part. You can't understand the fights that are happening there. Transformation, is that only for white universities? Or is that an issue for this institution? Student politics. There's an incredible history of student politics here. Can we start documenting that and talking about that? We have an honors student at Free State working on Tiro right now. Academic unionism. That doesn't start now, that starts from the 60s. And maybe we should just pay a short moment of respect for Gesle Mokgalong, given his contribution to this place. So, is there a Nahau here? What's the history of Nahau here? Does it play a progressive role? Or is it only worried about bread and butter? You see why critical? There are no holy cows here. You must be able to ask any question. Otherwise, we're not a university. So, size and shape. What's the size and shape of this place? How many undergraduate, how many postgraduate, how many humanities, how many sciences, how many this, how many that? Are you happy? Or do you want to change the size and shape? How many men, how many women? Access and success. How's your pass rates? How's your throughput rates? How's your graduation rates? Have they changed? Haven't they changed? Governance, leadership, funding, finances, university-state relationships, university-civil society relationships, architecture. Can we write about the architecture of this place? You can't change that. That's what you were given in 1959, but you're not where you were in 1959. You are changing the architecture. Is there a philosophy that drives that architecture? Or are we just putting buildings all over the place? Is there an idea of what this campus you would like it to look like in 20 years' time? Right? Your crest and your regalia, I've already spoken about the gowns. What are your crest and regalia? You will be shocked at the crest and regalias of some of our universities. You will be shocked, like Rhodes University and Colonel Graham. Rhodes University has, as part of its crest, Colonel Graham. Colonel Graham was a butcher. Colonel Graham massacred a Makosa. He introduced dimensions of warfare that we never knew, killing women and children and things like that. His family crest is on the Rhodes University crest. You see what I mean? We better start paying attention to those things. What visual imagery? Is it only men that we see on the walls here? At Rhodes, you only saw men. You only saw white men. Until the women said no more. In this council chamber, this senate chamber, the white men are going. We're not burning those things. We're going to put them somewhere else. And then we got a tapestry made by the Kaiskama hook that went right around here, documenting the good, the bad, and the ugly of Rhodes in tapestry. Right? We can change things. Okay, so what do we want to see? Outcome. We want to see a peer-reviewed volume, peer-reviewed, on the history of Limpopo, and there could be more. This is an invitation for you to start thinking about this institution and doing research that can also lead to journal articles, can lead to book chapters, and can lead to other creative outputs. For example, we can do research in a very participatory way that says to all students, academics, and alumni, write us a poem on your Limpopo. Wouldn't it be fascinating? I would like to see their poems on Limpopo today. I'd like to see your poem from the 1970s, My Limpopo. Let's be creative. Okay, so why? Why do we want to? Well, we want to advance knowledge. That's what the university is about. We want to share knowledge on this important institutions. Why are you keeping quiet? Why don't you celebrate the important things about this institution? We want to test and reinvigorate knowledge. We're not just taking knowledge for granted. We want to expand the archive. Professor Twala said, without an archive, what do we, quite apart from decolonizing the archives, we need to have archives first if we're going to decolonize them. There's not much we can do without archives as historians and writing histories and so on. We want to understand the University of Limpopo better so that it can inform its future development. Without that knowledge, how do we really plan for the next 20, 30, 40 years? And we want to document the heritage. So I'll just throw this out. 70th anniversary coming up in 2029. Right, so how? Well, I see this as a participatory project. This is not Saleem and Twala and two people writing the whole history. Everyone has a contribution to make to this history. Scholars, students, support staff, alumni, lots of people can contribute in different ways, of course. This is a collaborative research endeavor. It's not one person's work, right? And it should involve all departments and all disciplines. There's only so much we can do. Right now in Free State, we're still in the process of visiting every department. We've written to the deans, we've written to the HODs. It's quite clear it's not getting through. So now we have to go and visit all of them to say, why can't you contribute? Are you not interested in reflecting on politics at Free State, the discipline and where it comes from, and so on, right? We want to encourage, big words, epistemological and theoretical diversity. We don't want everyone to come at it in the same way. If you work in feminist theory, bring your feminist theory lens to analyze this place. If you work in a different theoretical frame, do that. But don't give us the same Eurocentric analysis, please. That's what I'm talking about, epistemological diversity. Sick and tired of that. It doesn't take us far enough. This is Africa. This is not Europe. We want innovative methodologies and methods. So yesterday, Victor was already talking about the digital platform he was thinking about. That's the kind of things you want. I promise you, set up a WhatsApp group tomorrow. Invite all students, academics, alumni to post whatever they want. A document there, a photograph there. You'll see how you'll build up your archive overnight, just through a WhatsApp group. I've been part of these things through non-racial tennis. I'm shocked at the incredible materials that people put on that you've never seen before. Please just tell them to put the names of who's in the photograph, because otherwise we're not going to know those things and so on. You see, you can use certain methods because of the digital technology now to allow us to do all kinds of works. And this is all about replenishing the archives, right? Building up the archives. And of course, we want rigorous peer-reviewed scholarship. These books will have to go to peers, right? We also need some seed investment from this institution about how's this all going to happen. All the universities that are taking part in this project are paying for themselves. Stellenbosch pays for its own part, UJ pays for its own part, Free State has given me a sizable budget for its history. Can't happen without some resources, because we need people as postdocs, as PhD students to work on these projects also. Right, so let's be concrete and operational now. If anything like this is going to happen, let me just say what is required. Firstly, you need someone coordinating this. Saleem can't do it from Free State. Saleem is looking after 7, 8 projects. You need an accomplished senior scholar with the necessary knowledge, expertise, and experience. And around that person, you need a core team. And that person, that coordinator, has to be freed some time from teaching and so on, because otherwise it's not going to happen. Otherwise, you're killing that person. On top of everything he or she does, they must do more. Not going to happen. I can tell you that. You need to decide where this project is located. You need to decide who's going to be part of this team. You're going to have to decide who are the UL scholars and who are people coming from outside to contribute to this. You need honors, masters, and PhD students. I don't have to tell you, that's not an expense, that's an investment. Because you'll get some of that money back. When you graduate, the honors students, and the master's students, and the PhD students, you'll get 350,000 rands for that. And when the publications come out, you'll get 120,000 for the chapter and for the article. And if the book comes out, you'll get 1 million rand for the book. And hopefully the DVC research will be happy. That's how it gets done at our universities. You have to do those calculations. So you need teams, like we've set up a team in the drama department at Free State. They're going to contribute a chapter to the book on Free State, but they're going to have a team in drama. Afrikaans Nederland is celebrating its 100th anniversary. They're going to contribute a chapter, and so on. So we're trying to bring as many people into this. We need the archive staff to be part of this, to work with us, to help grow the archives. So, next steps very quickly. If you think this is a good idea, and you have to think about this, because it's a commitment for 3, 4, 5 years. No history is going to come out next year. This is going to take 3, 4 years. Come on, let's be serious. That's why you need PhD students. They take 3 years. Mine is going to take 4 years now to finish, right? So, next steps, you need a coordinator and you need a team, and you've got to produce a proposal that everyone's going to be happy about. This is the proposal of what we're going to do, and this is what the book's going to look like. You need to mobilize the contributors like we are doing at Free State. You need to confirm who's going to contribute, by when, and so on. You've got to convene a workshop to discuss all these things and so on, right? So, my sense from where we are now, and we've done this elsewhere, by late 2024, by the end of this year, you need to plan the project, develop the proposal, have a preliminary bibliography, have a timeline of UL, identify the contributors, mobilize the resources, set up the project office. These are very practical things you have to do. And by late 20 to 20, that period, that's when we start doing the research, writing, publishing, whatever we're going to do. So, let me end up very concretely, what it could look like. This is purely indicative, but to give you a concrete sense of what it could look like. So, imagine a book, or 2 or 3 volumes. Provisional title, The University of Limpopo, A Critical Institutional History, 1959-2028. Introduction. Historicizing the University of Limpopo, locating it in history. Section 1, Origins and Development of the University of Limpopo. The Road to the University College, so I'll contribute that chapter. Chapter, Early Formation. These names are provisional, so I've put my PhD student there. Now, am I confident that those 3 chapters can go into the book? No, not yet. So I or someone will have to work with him to make sure those chapters are going to be in a position. So I've got his name there because he's working on these things right now. A chapter on 77 to 94. A chapter on Limpopo in a democracy. Now we can get to the themes and issues that we want people to contribute to. Architecture and built environment. I spoke to Anne Heffernan last night. She's at Durham. I can write that chapter for Limpopo since you don't have an architecture department. Right? At Free State, we are asking the architecture department to write the chapter on the architecture of Free State. Right? Visual imagery. You must have people here who work on visual image stuff. Write us a chapter on the visual imagery of Limpopo. Teaching and learning. TVC. Come on. We need a chapter on teaching and learning at this institution. Whoever's going to do it. Research. What is the state of research at this place? Right? Same with community engagement. Now we want histories of disciplines. We want a history of history. We want a history of philosophy. We want a history of microbiology. We'll work with you. I know you science people tell you, hey, you guys use too many big words in the humanities, like epistemology and ontology and all that. We'll work with you and explain those things. We know you're not historians, but you can write. You should be able to do research and reflect on your discipline. Come on. Merger and demerger. There's a chapter. Who's writing that? Institutional culture. We want more than one chapter. We want one from a woman and a man and a student and a staff. Leadership and management. Someone's going to have to write the chapter on leadership and management at this place. On governance, council, senate, and so on. On finance, on student politics, and so on and so on. 3 comments. Let me end up there. What we're going to be able to achieve depends on you, not on me. We can only do the hard work and try and persuade you. But if you don't contribute, what can we do? If you all contribute, we could have 3, 4 volumes. Maybe 4 million rand could be coming in subsidy. But if you don't contribute, maybe we'll just have 1 volume. And then it's not going to be as participatory as we want it to be. Other thing, you've got 3 years to contribute. If the project starts now, you've got 2025, 2026, 2027. You can put it into your diaries that someone is waiting for your chapter in July 2026. Come on. We're asking for chapters, not books. If you want to write books, you are welcome to. But, right? And then that will decide whether we have a single volume or we have multiple volumes. A single volume would take all those themes and put it under sections. So all the chapters become sections, and then under that we'll put the themes. Or we'll have a second or third volume, depending on what comes in and so on, right? So that's my story. It's about heritage. It's about history. It's about knowledge. And then it's about research. And the benefits should be obvious for this institution. And the last point, especially for those who like to count money. Right? I'm a vice chancellor. I know CFOs and finance people. This is an investment. For every honors, master's, PhD, and postdoc, you'll get something back. See it as an investment. And an investment in your heritage, and an investment on knowledge on your own institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Badat. I think there's just a few adjectives to describe the presentation. Thought-provoking. Radical. Challenging. And of course, we accept the challenges, don't we? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. It was quite helpful. It was quite resourceful. It made us think. Quite a number of things are going to happen from now. Firstly is I'm going to ask the director, Executive Director, Marketing, Mr. Victor Huemesana, to introduce the discussants. And thereafter, Professor Sibanda will take over the reins and facilitate the discussion or the conversation. And then, of course, I'll only return to the podium on item number 6. We have the sequence, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I really think we should intentionally and officially observe a moment of silence for Professor Mushenkondo. He's an alumnus of the university, a former lecturer, first SRC first SRC president at the institution, former deputy vice chancellor, and just a proud African and thought leader. The transformation of the higher education sector couldn't have been more grateful for the contribution he made. He's just somebody we should remember. With your permission, VC, I would say we observe a moment of silence, please, in honor of the late Professor Mushenkondo. Thank you. That was counting us down the ring. The discussants are the following, and we often don't introduce our Vice Chancellor. You know, yes, Prof, we have to introduce. These young guys don't know who you are, Prof. Bear with us. They are very registered. They are very registered. They are very registered. So we are going to have, I would say, 3 discussions. I will introduce 2, And then there is another one that I would like to introduce, and then I'll call upon the moderator of this session. First of all, the history of this university and the story of Professor Mokgalong are interwoven. Just quickly, he is the Vice Chancellor, as you know, in principle, but to some of us, he is a lecturer, professor, dean. Let me tell you this just to simplify. The university started in 1960, well, 1959. He has been in this township since 1967. Yeah? Imagine seeing the same landscapes, the same horizons. But the reason I'm mentioning it is he will understand more than most of us the story of this institution. Because when he was at Whitty doing Form 1 up to Form 5, the university was only coming into its own. It was growing. And there was an organic relationship between Whitty and the university. It was a training center, if you like, for the teachers. But from the time he taught zoology to some of us in the 80s, to becoming the executive dean, but most of all taking over this university when it was in the doldrums, literally. In 2002, nobody wanted to be here. You know, when you're running an institution that everybody wants to leave, and you struggle to attract staff because everybody's saying, well, what do you have to offer for me? And then you keep growing it from 8,000 students to 24,000 students, cater for the underprivileged, allow people to graduate without paying fees, but still put the university in a position where it's among the top 10 institutions in the country financially. And introducing recognized, accredited qualifications like Bachelor of Accounting, which is accredited by SAICA, getting the MBCHB introduced, the only institution in post-1994 South Africa to introduce an MBCHB. That is quite phenomenal. So I think he deserves, as the first discussant, a round of applause and gratitude. The second discussant, of course, you've already heard him, but just in case you're wondering why we invited him, first of all, he is the guest of the Vice Chancellor, but he's the research professor in the history department at UFS, University of the Free State. He has been a research professor at the College of Humanities at UKZN, University of KwaZulu-Natal. He was Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University. He was the first Chief Executive Officer of the Council on Higher Education. He also was Program Director in charge of international higher education at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation in New York, New York. He wrote several books, including The Forgotten People, Political Banishment Under Apartheid, Black Student Politics, Higher Education and Apartheid, Black Men, You're on Your Own, and he co-authored lots of books and articles. But most notably, I realized this year, he released a book called Tennis, Apartheid and Social Justice. It's published by UKZN. It is the first non-racial international tennis tour, 1971, in celebration of Usain Bolt, who was denied an opportunity to play at the Junior Wimbledon in 1971. Because he, Prof Badat, is also a former champion, tennis champion. So he's not just, That's our second discussant. We are going to have another discussant later who kindly accepted our invitation to be here. He was the head of department of history department. He was very tall when we were students here. We used to look at him like this. And he was one of a few professors like Professor Simon who did not mind walking this campus. So we appreciate you, Professor Louis Changion. You wrote lots of books, I think 13 of them, including the history of Petersburg, which must still be put together. And let's acknowledge also in absentia somebody who wrote the book on the history of the university, Christopher White. He's not very well right now. He's very frail, but we think this initiative, VC, will, among other things, unearth that kind of treasure and put them on the pedestal so that we can celebrate them. Last but not least, let me introduce the moderator, Professor Oss. He's the Executive Dean of our Faculty of Management and Law. He's going to be taking us through this. He will steer this panel discussion and take us to its conclusion. They say when colonists, this is Frantz Fanon as I leave, when colonists want to really conquer you, they don't just take your land and leave it there. They start attacking your history. If you don't know your history, others will attack it for you until it does not exist. And when they ask you, Prof. Sibanda, you want to be a professor like whom? You will not have any example in your lineage. So this story about the history of the university is making sure that the great-great-great-grandchildren of the young people who are here, one day when they are asked, you would like to be an academic, but who in your lineage ever did anything great? They will be able to reference the history of this university. Prof. Sibanda, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabik, Mr. Homiaswana. I think I've been immobilized in terms of the presentation that was made by Professor Badat. You have touched on so many things, so many issues, making my life a little bit easier but difficult in terms of moderating, the dialogue and also the discussion. Because what is going to happen moving forward, we are first going to have our VC, Professor Mokgalong, in sort of a discussion with Professor Badat, particularly flowing from the presentation that was made. And then we'll add, again later on, still the first segment of our, we'll add Professor Louis Changwin, who will also really assist us in terms of some of the issues that are quite relevant to the issue or the theme of today, because we are talking about, the importance and relevance of institutional heritage, particularly in contemporary society. But then allow me to say this. I want each of you to take just half a minute, if you can, if you don't mind. But if you mind, you can open your eyes. Close your eyes for half a minute and imagine yourself outside of this building and tell us what you see, but in your own heart. Thank you. Somebody's like seeing a cow. I heard say something like a cow. That sight. They say if you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are. This particular phrase is created to so many people, so I don't want to say who this belongs to. But I will just leave it like that. Prof. Mokgalong, at his acceptance as the Chancellor of the then University of the North, Limpopo, our late statesman, President Nelson Mandela, I think it was the 25th of April, 1992, he really took to the stage and painted a picture about the University of Limpopo and its significance, the role it played in terms of shaping the history and even the heritage of South Africa as a whole. He was basically saying something that not often people really will zoom into. But then he also said the following, and noting, past students like Onkgopoze Tiro, Prof said something about Tiro, Festus Mutudi, Ignatius Matebule, and many others, to say they have inscribed the name of Teflup into the conscience of so many of our people. And with that said, I don't know how we are going to do it, but then I'm going to ask, immediately I'm done, Professor Mokgalong and Professor Badat to take to the stage, and then we'll have Professor Louis Changwin later on. But then let me also, before you go ahead, Professor Mokgalong, because you'll be leading at least that particular dialogue for a few minutes. If you don't, maybe if you don't mind, in terms of really sort of responding or putting into context, because it was about our university that was on the PowerPoint. But I want also to sneak into a question to Professor Badat. I want to sneak into a particular question, to this particular discussion. You can answer it later on. We have said that we are at the University of Limpopo, and you talked about a particular history and the heritage, which is not really much talked about. But I can tell you, Mr. Commercial will later tell us that now, basically we have lined a week long of activities around that particular subject. Do you think that the University of Limpopo should also, at one point, be identified as the UNESCO World Heritage Site? That's just that particular question. I know it is University of Fort Hare has been around July, been so identified, but what about University of Limpopo because of some of the things that you have just indicated? Professor Mokgalong, do you mind taking to the stage? And also Professor Badat. I don't know which side do you want to...
I must have my right hand free.
Oh, you're...
Thanks, Professor Siban. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for making time to be here. Thanks, Louis. University of Limpopo, as you know it, has got a very rich history, which unfortunately is not documented. You might find pieces here and there, but a project like this, Prof. Badat, I think we have to embrace, we have to run with it. There's no way we can drop the ball this time. Having said that, the history of the area, I can't remember which year was that when something just crossed my mind, Louis, Macmillan, Winds of Change. We wanted a lot of information about him, and all my former colleagues, when I asked them, they couldn't relate Macmillan with the Macmillan copy next to the hospital. And thanks to Prof. Mukhajani, he went and unearthed minutes of cabinet, the time when Macmillan was visiting, and his whole itinerary was documented there. And that's how he ended up at the copy next to the hospital. And for some reason, the chiefs who were there then ended up giving it the name Macmillan copy. Fast forward, the university where it started, College North Limpopo, if you look at how it started, yes, it was a creation of the nationalist government. And they were very careful in how they did these three universities. In your books, historians, you'll find a list of Broederbond members. You go to Potgieter, you go to Boshoff, who ran this place. Those were Broederbond members. Forte, Zululand.
Cook.
Yeah. Yes. And I always say, hate them, but they guarded that which was their ideology. We messed it up when we came into government. Cadre deployment. They practiced it, and very well. That's why I'm talking about those people who ran these universities. And they went further than that, even into departments. If you look at the department where I was, Yokol Simon. At Forte, they had Engelbrecht. At Zululand, Koos Visser. Maybe young politicians, I've got guys in our executive who always claim to be politicians. But those are post-94 politicians. They know very little about what happened before then. Cadre deployment, if well controlled, it can take a country somewhere. They put in there people who were educated, people who understood it, and people who knew the mandate and understood it. Now with us, here it is today. My students are not here, that's why the SRC is not here. They are protesting because we don't have water anymore. And that's just how things happen. How departments, Saleem, got formed here. Vic, in the L block, we had zoology and physiology. Physiology gave birth to my physiological chemistry, which is biochem today. And from that, we had microbiology coming out, and then later, medical sciences. Clash of personalities in zoology ended up with the formation of aquaculture research unit. That's why I say we have that history. We just need to document it and do that. Yes, the university went through turbulent times. That one I don't think there's anybody who can deny. To a point where the assessor, one of the recommendations was close it down. This can never be a university. Close it down and let's see what can be done with the buildings. We did that. I never said this before. I deployed myself. It was not cadre deployment. I deployed myself and said, like you say, Vic, I've been in this area as a young man and I couldn't allow myself to see it going down. I deployed myself, and that's where the university is where it is today. Like it or don't like it or hate it, that's the reality about it. 2 years back, I said, I think I should undeploy myself. Now, it's for you guys to deal with that. That's not my baby, but I can't be here forever. I did my part. Saleem, the UL has got a history. If you look at it, Vic, 72, we used to boast at students that when Teflop sneezes, all universities will catch a cold. Sneezed in 72 after the graduation, Louis. You were still a young lecturer there, and Tiro said it. And the whole university sector caught it. 74, celebrating the Prof rally. It was something else. Started at Teflop, but then engulfed the whole country. So some of the things are painful to say. During the Prof rally, there were some staff members, white staff members, who got hurt in the process. And their anger got directed at those black activists who were academics. That evening, I had to write a zoology test. There were more army members than the students in the lecture hall when we were writing that test. The following day, one of the head staff members, I know the name, went out with a 3/8 special to look for Gessler. And they had to hide him in a cupboard. and the way that staff member was angry, you know, a 3-8 special will have blown out his brains. So that's the type of university we had. It has got that rich history. I'm happy that today, Dennis, you were there. You used to be a rabble rouser. You took us to Mankweng a number of times. We went there to protest the release of the SRC president, only to leave Cyril Ramaphosa there. Because they just came out and asked, who is Cyril Ramaphosa? And the bugger just walked past us. You know, when they are decent, they put a hand on your shoulder, you are under arrest. And that was the end of him at the University of Limpopo. That history has to be documented. I'm happy, Saleem, you're there. Let me not take time from others who might have questions. We will talk about these things. Thank you.
Prof. Badat, do you mind taking that particular question earlier on the perhaps?
So before I come to that very quickly, it just reminds me also, so, you know, I really want the students to imagine this. So it's very hard, right? But the 1980s were a hell of a period in this country, and especially at TURF, right? So I was on the national executive of the Azanian Students Organization, together with Joe Pashla, Ron Motsoledi, all those people. We were the same national executive. And I was involved in a lot of the media and political education and that kind of stuff. So all these campuses were part of us, the Azanian Students Organization. But from the mid-80s, I think, or late 80s, this campus was under occupation.
Yes.
By the army. So I'm wanting you to think about, put yourself in the 1980s, and this whole campus is run by the army, a university. How would you have navigated that? What would you have done? And don't think carefully, because these are people who's going to, they'll kill you. They're armed, right? So that's what we were having to battle at this campus in those years. People died. So remember that, you know. I mean, there should be also memorials to some of those people and so on, rather than just being forgotten and silenced and so on, right? That's part of our heritage, you know. We seem to forget some of those things, the sacrifices people made. Not just Tiru, there are others also, you know. So it's also about wanting to capture that, so that people have an appreciation of an institution and where it comes from and its complex history and all that. And its ability to also change. Because as we heard from the Vice Chancellor, at one point this university was on its knees financially. Today it's in a, you know, it's in a different situation. Mark Bunting has done this research of the strongest universities financially. He's in the accounting department at Rhodes. So we can actually say, on the basis of information, which are the strongest financially. And that's not an easy thing to get into, that kind of situation. You have to be very smart and wise to build up your reserves like that. The reserves of this university are probably 7 times more than Rhodes. That's not an easy thing to achieve. Because people like to give you money just for projects. They don't like to just give you money for a rainy day, you know. And you have to have money for a rainy day. So in a financial position that you are in now, there's exciting things you could potentially do. We're talking about this to say, hey, having all that money and not making it work is a waste of money. You need to make that money work. Put in new infrastructure, more scholarships for honors, masters, PhDs, you know, new exciting areas. Because beyond a certain amount of money, there's nothing you can do with that money. It's just lying there, you know. So you're in a very good situation moving forward as far as I can see. And let me just address one thing too. Your Vice Chancellor is right. I convened the size and shape exercise as advisor to the Minister in 2000. The CHE size and shape. Kader Asmal, the Minister, said, you shall not close any universities. The advice I want from you is no closures. That task team was myself, Mampela Rampela, Brian Figaji, Saki Makazoma, Khotso, very powerful people on that. And we did talk amongst ourselves closing some universities. But you can be assured it wasn't North. No, we did, but North was not one of those. We did talk about closing some of them. Eventually, we didn't close any, but we merged and combined. So out of 36 universities, we got reduced to 21 for good reasons. We didn't lose any student places. We could still have the same number of students, but reduce the number of universities, because in some cases, we had to just kick down the fence. Natal Technikon, Emal Sultan Technikon, kick down the fence, you've got a new university. Because they were separated by that fence. They're both Technikons in Durban. So the fact that no one in that task team, I'm just wanting to confirm, even had the courage to suggest closing this place, means they had an appreciation of the North. No one suggested closing Forte either. It'd be crazy to think about that, right? But there were universities we identified for closure. We thought we would be better if we closed those things, because no one wanted to send their sons or daughters there. Conditions were bad at some of those institutions. Okay. So the heritage thing, you know, really, to have that status, I assume you have to do a whole lot of work. And I think you have to ask yourself, all the work you do, for what prize ultimately? And having that status does what exactly for you? Does it bring you more money? Does it bring you more prestige? Because sometimes having that status means you have to fork out a whole lot of money to maintain your status also. So I don't really have a view on that, to be honest. I think you have to always just ask yourself, is this a vanity thing? Or is this a serious thing? And what advantages and benefits will it bring to us? Will it bring more better scholars to this university? Will it bring more third stream income? Will Roll Koza and others give you more money? You know, let's be practical around these things. So I think you have to think about this as part of your heritage and so on. So don't say no, but don't just rush and say yes either. Do the homework. I'm always reminding people that, you know, sometimes vice chancellors leave universities with terrible legacies, vanity projects that should never have been started, because someone's got to carry on with that project and it's costing millions every year. So
let's just pause it right there, Prof, because then that means, for me, it was again around the question of how do we preserve the heritage? If that is one way to go about it, or there are different ways. And perhaps this is an opportune moment to bring into, you know, the discussion Prof here. And then my question will be really, I know there are a lot of questions, but I think it's not more of a wanting your input on the feasibility or whether it is really desirable for a university like ours, University of Limpopo, to have a chair, you know, around cultural, you know, studies and heritage. Can we have a chair like that? Because when you look at UNESCO, you have got something like more than 18 chairs. You have a chair on law and, you know, law and heritage. So every faculty, every department, you know, can get, you know, a stake in terms of a chair. So what is your view? Do you think that it is one of the best way, perhaps then, to go about preserving heritage and also promoting it without getting involved into a vanity project? Prof. Mokgalong, you are allowed. This is your house. Any moment you want to pitch in, you can do that. But then the question is there. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start by first saying how much I appreciate that you've invited me. You know, there's one thing in life that I think everybody feels like that is you don't want to be forgotten. I had to go on retirement, on pension, because it was the policy at the time. You're 60, you had to go. And if I think back how much I could still have contributed, I mean, I took retirement, I had to go on retirement in 2002. They gave me another 2 years because I still had students in my department. And they closed out a lot of departments at the time. You'll remember that. The humanities were all closed. So I left here in 2004. And it's, in other words, more than how many years? More than 20 years that I've been on pension, and what I still could have done. But I appreciate the fact that you invited me, that you remembered me. And coming here and seeing old students of mine, seeing the Vice Chancellor who I remembered as a young man teaching zoology, and seeing my ex-students. You know, he was one of my ex-students. Now, I hardly recognize him. There's quite a few. There's another one, another student of mine. And that's nice, you know. When I walk in the street in Polokwane or in Tshwane, and a young black man stopped me and said, "Hello, Professor, how are you?" That I'm still recognized. So I came here today. I wasn't warned that I had to say something, and unfortunately I can't stay very long. I've got another appointment at 1 o'clock. But I'm not going to answer your question straight away. I have to have time to think about it. But what I want to say is the proposals that Professor Badat made is so important. I sat here listening to it, and I want to give my cooperation, if only in a little way. I'm too old now to write anymore. You know, I'm 84. And I just getting on. I can't do the things I still want to do. But, oh yes, and I also want to say, and to see one of my old colleagues in my department still teaching at this university, Claire Larkin over there. Hello, Claire. Yeah. She was a young girl when she came to this university. And I remember one of my colleagues we were in the K block. And one of my students, one of my colleagues, he tried his best to get Claire's attention. And one thing I remembered, you don't even remember it. Now this man is still today a well-known man. He's in politics. He's a well-known person. You see him on television. And he still wears a kopdoek, as we say, you know. And Claire one day was walking behind him, and she pulled it off. And he was so cross with her. Of course, he was bald, and in those days, young men didn't want to be known to be bald. In any case, so what you are planning to do, I can just say, call on me whenever you need me. I can give my cooperation. I've got I'm an historian, so I don't throw stuff away, you know, pamphlets or letters. I've got a hell of a big collection in my house where I stay in Johannesburg. And there might be stuff there that we can use in this project. And I'll be so pleased to be of any assistance to this. So I'm not answering your question, but you must excuse me now. I have to go. I've got another appointment. But thank you for inviting me. Two gentlemen over there came to see me, and they forced me into this.
Dr. Makuru.
Prof Sibanda, thank you very much, Prof. Mokgalong and our guest, Prof Badat. The deans here, please, all protocol observed. I'd just like to say something regarding Prof Louis Shengyo. I want to connect his history with CNN. On CNN, there is a young lady whose name is Frederica Whitfield. You might remember that her dad came to this university, an African American.
I remember it so well.
And Malcolm Whitfield, he was an Olympic runner. We just came back from the Olympics. But Professor Shangyun, when I was a student here, was one of the first, if I may say so, white people that I saw interacting so wonderfully with black students. He trained the athletes of this university on those, on that grounds where there's the Mushobani's residence. That was the running field. And you interacted with Matt Whitfield, that Olympian, so greatly, so wonderfully. I think 1972, 73, 74, around those years. I want to give you those accolades and also for helping me to understand history. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's just allow Prof to, you can say hi to the Vice Chancellor and your colleagues there.
Yeah.
Okay, I think they were still excited about the fact that you will be coming back. You can say hi to them, but then, yes.
Thanks, Louis.
So nice seeing you again.
Great.
And good luck with all the good work. Thank you for what you said. We'll talk again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we now we need to start moving to opening the floor for a few questions, because then something like 30 minutes for us. Yes. Can I first lay this particular ground rule? We still continue with this formal executive dialogue. Executive, let's underline the term executive. And then I'll give you an opportunity to ask a question, but let it be a question, not a long statement, unless if you are just making a comment to comment what has been said. Don't make 5 minutes statement and a question after that, then the whole 30 minutes is gone. I'll start with Professor Rafapa, and then you are number 2.
Thank you, Professor Moderator. Professor Badat, mine is, it could be ruled out as trivial, perhaps, no, but not really trivial, maybe facetious. When I looked at the plan of the book, I saw a plan to have a chapter, and the chapter is tentatively titled University of Limpopo 1974 to 1994. But what caught my eye is the tentative title, something like From Soweto to Liberalization. Now I'm wondering if that liberalization is a typo, was perhaps meant to be liberation. Liberalization, my question is, would it perhaps imply that post-1994, the university became liberal, like the vets of the past, that scoffed at Eskiam Patlele, who came and attempted to have the Department of English being pitch black, and had to be relegated to head a Department of African Studies that was created specifically to relegate him, because the vets of those days, the liberal one, wouldn't stomach a black person heading a Department of English. Does the liberal mean liberal ideology? Have we turned liberal as University of Limpopo after 1994? I mean, the same university that scoffed at Malrapur Makhuba for being a real African, and we know what happened to him. I'm just asking, have we turned liberal, or is it a liberation? Is it a typo or intended? That's all. Thanks.
Prof can take that question.
Yeah. So very quickly, no, it's not a typo. So you're raising interesting things. So I was just whispering to the Vice Chancellor that when you look at the history of, because I'm doing this histories, as part of the history of universities in South Africa. For many years, the idea that Wits was liberal is incorrect. And if it's liberal, it's conservative liberal. Right? Because you get conservative liberal, you get liberal liberal, you get radical liberal. So we have to open and work out. In the same way, conservatives are many different kinds, right? So for most of its history, as far as I'm concerned, the so-called open universities, Rhodes you can't even call liberal. Rhodes is conservative because it wasn't even an open university. You know, the Rhodes Senate took a decision in 1933 to exclude black students. No other university in this country did that. So Rhodes is a particular animal in the zoo of our universities, right? So what we are meaning by that, you're raising another important point. So when we do history, we have to do something called periodization. You can't start at 1652 and end up in 2024. You have to start, because you can't understand the country like that. You have to periodize it. So when I'm doing my research for my book, my first period is 1652 to 1910, the colonial period. 1910 to 1948, segregation, pre-apartheid. A lot of the apartheid stuff was laid between 1910 and 1948. Before the nasty Nats, as they called. Because you don't understand this country if you imagine 1948 was a big change. A lot of the laws and norms were laid in that segregation. The Land Acts, all the land was taken away then. Not in 1948. The land was taken away in 1913 and 1936 already. Under segregation. White English speaking. Would their friends call Jan Smuts? Or Herzog, who was the principal of Wits. Youngest vice-chancellor in the country, I think he must have been in his 20s or his 30s. But he was the right-hand man of Jan Smuts. Right? So what we're talking about there is when we look at a place like Limpopo, we have to first locate it in the apartheid period, because it comes in 59. Right? You can't understand Limpopo without understanding the apartheid period and those laws and so on, right? So we're saying, okay, the first period we can look at internally now, not the macro, is 1959 to 1976-7. Why? It's from formation to the Soweto uprising. Right. But within that, like my PhD student is saying, the period 59 to 69 or 70. Why? Because autonomy comes in 1970. Before 1970, this institution was completely under UNISA. In 69, the act changes for all the universities, and the universities become autonomous and become universities. They're no longer university colleges, right? So 59 to 70 as internal differentiating this. Then after that, that period to 76, 77, because Soweto uprising is a major issue in this country, to which the protests in this university contributed through the Black Consciousness movement, right? And then 76, 77 to 1990 is to liberalization. Okay, what do we mean by that? February 2nd, 1990. De Klerk is forced to unban the ANC, the PAC, release Mandela, and so on. So we enter a liberalization period in 1990 to 1994, when we move from transition to a democracy. Now, some would argue we need to look at the University of North until 90, and then 1990 to 1994. What was happening here? Now, that might be too short a period, right? So we have to think very carefully about the start and the ends. These are not accidental, whether we use 77 or 90 and so on, right? So that's how we're doing it. And then after 1994 to today is the democracy period, but we may have to divide that. How would we divide it? There's many different ways we would divide it. We could say, okay, we'll take the Mandela and Mbeki period, And then we take the Zuma period. Is that satisfactory? Maybe not. Maybe we'll do it in a different way. We'll take it from 1994 to the merger. And then post-merger. You see, we'll have to make those choices, and you will have to argue around those things. That's the beauty of this. It's not set in stone. We're going to have to fight and argue, contest ideas around the periods and all those kinds of things. And those periods are important, because if you're going to have themes under them, then the themes have to fit in under those periods, in terms of how you conceive the book and so on. Right? So I hope that clarifies. No, it's not liberal, it's liberalization 1990 as a separate period.
No, thanks very much. My name is Khankim Patlele. I want to ask the question relative to the topic because it says the significance of institutional heritage and the relevance in contemporary society. So we are a democratic South Africa. You were the Vice Chancellor of Rhodes University. Young people in around 2014, they went to the streets and said the roads must fall. How do young people say roads must fall today and we still conserve the status quo of maintaining the name of university after Rhodes? I think in 2004, 2005, the University of the North changed into University of Limpopo. So this shows how much it's possible to change the name of a university from a reactionary figure to a revolutionary figure. Yeah. So that's number one that I wanted to ask. On the side of Prof. Mokgalong, I didn't know but that you are the first Vice Chancellor to deliver medicine after post-democratic South Africa. And I know you served for a very long time. Please, just like President Zuma gave free education when he was outgoing, can you give us engineering and natural sciences? Can you please, Prof? I mean, we're saying, just like President Zuma gave us free education as an outgoing president of the country, can you one day give us...
Interesting, because it links to what you said earlier on about, transformation, heritage. And then when you, I think the lawyers are here, there is a case, the Geleke Cancer versus the chairperson of the University of Stellenbosch. And that particular case really gave a picture or a reflection of the difficulty, or complexity of heritage, transformation, and also making sure that now you do not dilute heritage when you talk about transformation, because that's exactly what, in a sense, what he's saying. So I thought perhaps it will say, go ahead.
So, to take your first one, right? So I think maybe I should preface this by saying that as important as humans are and leadership is, leadership makes a difference, right? A leadership can destroy a university. We've seen that. Or leadership can maintain the university and take it to higher levels, right? So don't assume that leadership only builds. Leadership can destroy also. We're suffering because of certain leadership in this country, right? So when you so the important point about that is humans make history, but not in conditions of their own choosing, right? So don't expect miracles either. Limpopo has to work within that. Limpopo can be part of a movement that says we must stop that. That's what Jacques Gerwel said in 1987. The University of the Western Cape is going to be the intellectual home of the left, because UCT is linked to English capitalism, Stellenbosch is linked to Afrikaans capitalism, and there's one movement in this country that has no universities. It's called the Democratic Movement. And so UWC attached itself to that, right? Incredible leadership. That's why I ended up going to that university as a young person. That's the only place I wanted to be. Spent 10 brilliant years there, right? So when you come to Rhodes now, let me answer your question directly, right? I was going to a meeting of the Committee of Heads of Research and Technology. That's all the presidents of the SRC, MRC, and so on. And as I'm walking there, Paul Jordan, who was the head of Mintech, shouts out and says, Saleem, congratulations. We've excited you, the next Vice Chancellor of Rhodes, the first black person. when are we coming to the renaming ceremony? I shouted back, not in the first 5 to 10 years. Right? Now you might think I'm a sellout. That's fine. You can think that. For me, there were more important things at Rhodes than changing the name. And what name do you want to change it to? So that's your name. There are other people who want Ruth first. There are other people who want other names. Biko is from Ginsberg. He's not directly from the Makanda area. So what about Makanda? Why? So you see what I'm trying to say. These are contested. And in your first period as a vice-chancellor, you want to unify that campus. You want to take it forward around transformation issues, and the name thing is going to kill you. Because even the black students will oppose it. You know that. Not clever blacks. Black students more generally. Because they think the name Rhodes University is an international, and I'm going to use a word that they use, which I hate, brand. Right? So you may not like it, but you've got to be very strategic around these things. So for me, for my first 10 years, the most important thing was starting the process of transformation. And I always maintained the name would take care of itself. Because what kind of name do you want to give it? Steve Biko, when it's a colonial racist institution. When you come out of that, then you can start thinking about names. Right? Because otherwise it's just a token gesture. We're calling Rhodes Steve Biko, but nothing's changed. Right. The other thing I was asked before I went there, when will you apologize for all the terrible things Rhodes did to black people? I said, I must apologize. Me, as a black South African, I must apologize personally. So they thought that in my inaugural in September I would apologize. I refused to apologize for the institution. But when the SRC came to me in 2008, said, we think we'd like to rename the Student Union building the Steve Biko building, and it's a prominent building. I said to them, you have my support, but now I want your support. That's the day we will publicly apologize for all the terrible things Rhodes has done. And we will acknowledge our shame and we'll draw a line. That's what happened in September 2008, 2 years after I became Vice-Chancellor. I was not prepared to apologize. Who's Saleem to apologize? The institution must apologize, not the Vice-Chancellor. The institution is the Senate and the Council. So when I found the right time, with the right support, we went to Senate. And a senior person sitting there in the front, professor of physics, stood up and said, Vice-Chancellor, all the things you're telling us, is this true? I said, ask the professor of history, Paul Mahlo. He helped to us research. That professor, I thought it was going to be a fight. When that professor, white guy, very famous astronomer, stood up and said, we have no option but to apologize. End of the story. There were no fights. Council approved it, and the apology was made. Right? So what I'm trying to say is that these are 10,000-meter races. You don't need Usain Bolts for this. You need Ethiopian and Kenyan runners. So when you become a vice-chancellor, you can't do it all in 3 months or 6 months. You must have a sense of 10 years of what your agenda is and not to be moved from that agenda because you know what you're going there to do and so on, right? So the name issue. It was starting to become an issue in my second term. So I had a 7-year term and then they offered me a 10-year term after that at Rhodes. I said, no, thank you. I'm going somewhere else. So in my second term, I would have made it an issue. And I'll be honest about that. If they did not change the name, I would have walked. I would have resigned. That was going to be a make or break issue. I can't make it a make or break issue in the first 5 years because if I go, what's going to happen? We're back to where we are. I had to secure what was going to come after me and so on with Dr. Mabuzela, right? So My sons want nothing to do with roads. And I respect them. Because if Rhodes thinks by not changing the name, they're going to curry favor in some quarters, they're not recognizing they're losing support in other quarters by not changing the name. So I would like its name to change. And I think the decision that council did under a black chair of council, when they voted to retain the name, was a terrible mistake. Now, where are the students at Rhodes? Because that's a very powerful force. Have they got it on the agenda? But the surveys we did, my friend, in Smuts house and all that, was frightening. The black students don't want to change the names. And it's not only clever blacks. You must know the terrain you're working on. People they get emotionally tied up with the names. We are Smuts boys, we are Botha boys, and so on. You say, like, guys, what are you talking about, Botha boys and Smuts boys? The power of reproduction and so on. Right? So that's the big name issue. The second part was, just remind me again.
Engineering.
Engineer, okay, good one. Right. He can answer it in his own way. But I'm quite clear about this. I don't want to talk about this institution, but I'll talk about Rhodes. There are alumni who want engineering at Rhodes. There are alumni who want veterinary science at Rhodes. And there are alumni who want medicine at Rhodes. Because every university vice-chancellor wants those. Not this vice-chancellor. No, thank you. Engineering would have killed Rhodes. So I always use the example. Some wealthy dude like Alan Gray or all those people are Rhodes graduates. If they came and told me, Saleem will give you 100 million to start engineering, I would have said, I will take it to the Board of Governors, I will take it to the council, but I want you to know my own view. I'll be fighting any attempt to start engineering at Rhodes or medicine. Because we've got enough engineering faculties in this country. Many of the people who are teaching there are not South African. They're from Europe and elsewhere. That's not a reason not to have it. But that becomes a vanity project for Rhodes, because there's enough engineering. There's Stellenbosch, there's KZN, there's Pretoria, and so on. How many engineering can you have? Right? The same with medicine. There's no tertiary hospital in Makanda. Come on, man. Where are people going to train? So it makes sense for the medical school to be in Gqeberha, linked to Livingston Hospital. You have to think about those things and so on, right?
Prof, in a short way, this particular response, just a short way, then we'll take the last two questions so that then we can really go to a close.
Yeah. But you have to look at all the time about what you should be starting.
Yes.
So my philosophy is, good things come to those who are first. Good things come to those who are first. If you start a new academic program and you make that your niche and no one can tackle you there, great for you. So I'll give you an example, bioinformatics. UWC became and then when the academics came to me at Rhodes and said, we need to start bioinformatics, I said, hey, footsack. Why? Why? Because we want to compete with UWC. We shouldn't be competing with UWC. Come with a new area. Let us move into that area. Why we want to take an area away from another historically black university? So we have to be sensible about this.
But let's locate the very same question now to where we're here.
I can't answer that for you.
I know you can't answer that, but then obviously you do have some
I'm giving you the thinking
thinking about it. Do you think that, for instance, mineral engineering as a faculty at the University of Limpopo, any other university within the Limpopo province, will kill that particular province, take into account the lots of mines that are here and everything that really can benefit from a faculty like that?
Good answer.
Firstly, let me start by saying you cannot be everything to everybody. There's no way you can have all the programs in the world at one university. some years back, we had a department of geology at this university. With time, no student wanted to register for geology. The mood of the times, the way things were done then, there's just no way a black student could do anything in geology. It was closed. Fast forward, look at Prof. Sibanda, the mines around us. There are many mines around us. We introduced geology. Go and look at the number of students who are registering for geology. Many. Because now there are jobs there. Now there's a need for geologists out there. University of Limpopo responded. There's a spaceship coming, a building which will be housing earth sciences. You can't be everything to everybody, but somewhere you will make that contribution. We have 2 good hospitals in the province, the Petersburg Hospital and the Mount Kweng Hospital. Good platforms for training medical doctors, medical specialists. Now, through the influence of the University of Limpopo, there's a massive tertiary hospital coming out at our EduPark campus. Those are the areas you choose and you say, I will excel in this, I will make a difference in this area. I know engineering. I have a young man at home who did engineering, ended up doing a master's in commerce, and is now in the banks. And that made me ask myself, why did he leave engineering after having a master's degree in engineering? Let's think about these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will just add to that. Okay. You know, no university can have everything today. Not even UCT or Pretoria. You have to specialize. You have to make a name for yourself in particular areas, right? And, you know, you have to have a map of where you want to go. Not because they have engineering, we want engineering, and so on, you know. There has to be a basis for some of those things. And now we're talking about very expensive areas. My fear was someone giving us 100 million, and then she disappears. The next 50 years we are having to find money to keep engineering going. It would have destroyed roads. You see, Rhodes Business School is not, I don't want to use the word best, right? Rhodes Business School is not Gibbs, it's not UCT, it's not Stellenbosch. It's a regional business school. It's not competing with those big names and so on, because it can't compete. It's in Makanda, you know. It's not in Pretoria or Stellenbosch or Cape Town or Joburg, you know. So this is the handicaps of history. This is where this university was put. This is where Makanda Rhodes was put. So you have to think about niches, and you have to be careful of not pursuing areas where you don't have a basis to pursue it. And the most important thing is not the money and the buildings, it's the humans. Will we have enough people to come here and start a whole new engineering school? And by the way, there's a little matter of the CHE and the Department of Higher Education and Training. I don't know today, but I know when I was head of the advisory body to the minister and you came and said engineering, I would have said, they're joking. Let them do something else. The ministry will have to approve as part of your program qualification mix. You can't just offer these things. And they'll probably say to you, do something else. You cannot get into engineering. So what Rhodes really wanted is only one thing, veterinary science. Because there's only one veterinary science in the country. And we thought that's dangerous. So maybe veterinary science, if you can make the case. So I heard last week someone went to a Farmers Weekly something and said that Free State is getting a veterinary science faculty. I said, whoa, what's Mabazela going to say about this? Because they are keen on this. Where does this come from? So I immediately contacted the DVC research. He said, no, it's not quite true. It's an agricultural thing, not a veterinary science. Because I said, like, where was this decision taken? Veterinary science is one of the most expensive in the country. And this morning in your office, I was reading something.
We produce 140 veterinary science graduates every year. 100 of them leave the country. Can we sort that out before we start more veterinary science? Because we are producing for Canada, Australia, at huge cost. 100 out of 140 graduates are leaving this country. Come on, we better fix that first before we have more veterinary science and so on. Because otherwise all we are doing is exporting these people. A global south country exporting our best talent to the north.
Thank you. The significance of heritage and relevance in a contemporary society. I think we have really done a good job in terms of, there's one there. I said two. I guess I'm going to get two. I'll start with the lady at the back. And then the gentleman here, and those two. And then that will be it for the day. That will be it for the day, because then we need to hand over the second part of this session. We're still going to have a lot of this discussion. We have got a week long at the University of Limpopo, really, to dissect all these issues. Thank you. Make it short.
Okay. Greetings, I'm Gunakarabu. I have a question for Prof. Mokgalong. You mentioned that UL has a lot of history, but majority of it is yet to be documented. So my question is, why is it the case? Why is it not yet documented when we have a lot of activists, a lot of professors or historians who experience or were part of these political movements or historic times?
Thank you. I hope that the director of marketing was not leaving, because then you could have easily answered that particular question briefly. But I think we can come and answer that question. The question here. Let me just one again. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Peter Mukwena, former student. I have a background in heritage management. I used to serve as the CEO of the National Agency dealing with heritage matters some years back. Just out of interest, professors, I'm just a little bit worried that, of course I don't know the perimeters, the scope of the project, but I'm worried that sometimes we can hide a university from communities by putting it inside books and publications only. There must be the bricks and mortar part of things. So what I was actually thinking was, or wondering was, is there a possibility of including an actual commemorative structure, such as a museum, linked to the university? The reason why I'm asking that question is that if this is the first university established in what we used to call the far north, one, it sits on the foundations of the former Roswy Empire in Mapungubwe. Same thing with the Thulamela on the northern side. It sits on the Lulu Mountains. And then not only that, about 4 or 5 nations or kingdoms interface in the space where the university is. The Bapedi Kingdom, led by Sekhukhune, Batloba, Makgoba, Maleboho, the Ndebele one, the Venda one. So the university sits on the foundations of former big kingdoms. In addition to that, the university was a construction site for major leaders. There are many leaders who come from here. In my time, it was also a struggle site. So what I'm trying to understand is there a possibility of linking the project you will have possibly with a museum, number one? This is key because Limpopo doesn't have a national museum. It's one of the provinces that doesn't have a national museum. 2, it is assumed that all the histories of the liberation struggle happened outside in Limpopo. It didn't happen. So if we could create that space, I think it would help. If not, a garden of remembrance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. To answer the last part first, what year is this? 2024. Okay. Last year, November, we presented jointly with the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture in Limpopo to the National to the National Department of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture. The submission was, I must say, VC, the outcome of the work of Professor Nkondo, because during his time at the National Heritage Council, he was part of the think tank that created what is called the Resistance and Liberation Heritage Route, which follows the trails of different anti-apartheid struggles, but even before apartheid, anybody who ever mounted any resistance, there is a project that is being funded by the National Department of Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture, and we submitted a proposal with Limpopo. There were 3 projects in the province, and the University of Limpopo was one of them. And what we proposed at the time was, instead of trying to get the entire university proclaimed as a heritage site, let's pick different features. So the Sovenga Kopi, the hill, will be part of that. The pond, which many people undermine, but is part of the wetlands here, will be secured. It's been very well looked after, maybe, among other things, thanks to VC, because he's a life sciences man. And then we have the student center. We have Trafalgar Square. We have the old library, where we are building already with the computer science department, the UL Digital Gallery. It will be launched during the 65-year celebration. That is like a university app. We don't want to have a Facebook account only. We want to have our own Facebook or Facebook equivalent, so that students can upload their photos from the past 65 years. And then we also have old admin, because the 4th floor has significance. And I think Madiba as the residence. And house number one, where the Vice Chancellor used to stay. And last but not least, the fig tree at Matsiri Park, where in 1956, 11th October, the 13 traditional leaders met, including Sukukune, Masirumule, Puramabulana, Mupedi from Kwakwa, Pilani from the northwest. They met and founded the university effectively. So we want to erect 13 granite structures named after the traditional leaders who were there. So that's a project that's going to be, it has been approved at national level, but I'm sure we're going to have to raise additional funding to make it happen. That's the spirit in which we are trying to memorialize this, but we had to bring in the department and the National Heritage Council. Regarding why we don't document the history, I don't know. History is hard. It's not an easy discipline. Yeah. To go out and look for, if you listen to Prof. Twala, how you are able to look at documents and say, this doesn't look right. I can tell you this, I'm a media person. You have seen how lazy the media industry has become. Somebody posts on Twitter, that's a source. Whereas training in journalism tells you, when you get a source saying, it's raining outside, to paraphrase Stephen Grote, don't just say somebody tweeted and said it's raining, call and you go out and check for yourself. And it is raining, I can feel it. Then I can ask, why is it raining? Who is causing it to rain? Who can stop it? So unfortunately, that kind of research is undermined. And because we are, unfortunately, too skewed in favor of STEM subjects, we overlook that the problems that face humanity today will not be solved by only physicists and chemists, and they'll be solved by psychologists and social workers and sociologists and anthropologists and historians. And you see it in how even banks are starting to employ artists, they're starting to employ engineers, Prof. That's the reason, because they know being a financial institution doesn't only require your knowledge of accountancy. So I don't know. For our part, we are trying, but remember this, I am marketing. I cannot historicize this university. That's why I pleaded with Prof. Twala when Prof. Saleem Badat approached the VC to make sure we create an academic home for this kind of project. So that it's not a nice to have extramural activity that marketing runs, but it's become part of for the academic project. I hope I answered the questions. But starting from now, the young lady who asked about that, please stop tweeting and Instagramming about Kim Kardashian and I don't know who else, this demure thing that's now taking, I don't even know where it comes from. Start asking questions. You are in Mankweng. Start asking questions. Who was Mankweng? Who? Because there was a real person. Who donated the land here? Start documenting the stories of Limpopo. Take them to Instagram. That way you'll be respected. You're always going to be second best if you try and catch the trend that started in New York or in Los Angeles or in London. You'll be first if you take yourself seriously. And I say you have so much power in the palms of your hand. You have so much power. But goodness gracious, you are following the wrong role models. You are showing some, I don't know, lack of class, if I may say sometimes. So let's remember the power is at your fingertips with the things that you're tweeting about, that you're Instagramming about. Don't fall into the trap of sensationalism. Take yourselves more seriously, and you'll be amazed how much you can document your own history. Thank you very much. I'm getting carried away now. You can see that.
Thank you. Last two. Yes. Okay, just take it and then.
So again, you know, the idea of museums and all that are all available, but you have to think carefully about those things. Right, so let me just share with you. There's only one university in this country that has anything that resembles a museum. Right? And that's Stellenbosch. No other university in this country has a museum on itself that documents its own stuff. Now, that's not to say you mustn't do it. If you do it, some good things can come, because I really think if you first, good things can come. You set a model for people and so on. But then you also have to worry about why only one university has got a museum. And it's not about money alone, because those things have to be maintained. You've got to pay salaries. You've got to preserve all that stuff and so on, right? So these are important decisions you have to think about and not just do with the heart. You've got to use the head here also, right? But what you were saying was so interesting, because I was saying to Riatele recently, after reading one of his chapters, I said, hey, Riatele, brother, can't we be a bit more exciting in our introduction to the chapter? This is a little boring. In this chapter, I shall do the following, you know. Can't we start that chapter by saying, when the Afrikaners arrived here in the 1840s, this land was occupied by whoever. And it's on this piece of land that this university gets created. And for that, you have to go beyond the history books. You then have to start reading other things. And then you may have to read fiction. And maybe there's sculpture somewhere inspired by some. You see how you bring all that into it. Instead of boring in this chapter, I'm going to, you know, you bring other parts of fiction, history, diaries, journals, and so on. So when that gentleman told us yesterday all the things, told us now, I don't know what you were thinking. Me, I want to go to his house now. I want to see what he's got. Because he may have things that you don't even have at this campus. And then I was saying, we have to go through that, and we better start talking about digitizing that stuff. Because tomorrow if there's a fire, there's everything gone. My PhD is now regretting because he had to start going to interview people, but we said he can only start interviewing people first 3 months next. Nkondo is gone. Every day, unless we get to interview people, history is getting wiped out. How are we going to replace Nkondo's memories and so on? Now this is a real trauma for me that he's gone and my PhD student can't get to him, you know. So the longer we take, the more people are passing on. And we're not interviewing them and so on.
I hope your student will get a very flexible assessor who is not going to want that, because other assessors really will say that, no, you didn't say I'm going to do this. With that said, let's take the last two.
Good.
The last two.
Yes. Good day. My name is Morores Kukune.
Speak to the mic.
My name is Morores Kukune. I'm the chairperson of University of Limpopo Debating Society. First, I think I should say that if not lucky, but I'm proud to find myself being a student in this institution. While there was many conspiracies that, no man, you can't go to UL. If you get good marks, you have to go to UJ, VETS, or all those other institutions. But we found ourselves having to choose this institution, not because maybe life moved us outside there, but we just chose UL outside everything. Because if you check the history, and as a history student, you find likes of Biko have stepped here, likes of Nkgopoze Abraham, Ramutivi Tiros stepped here, Tsietsi Mashinini, the influence they had to even Bo Tebogo, Tsietsi Mashinini in Gauteng, 1976, Soweto massacre, the rise of COSAS, and all the history in the agitation of the comfort zone of apartheid. I think we as students, especially in humanities, should be proud that we find a curriculum that is Afrocentric and it speaks to African issues. Then my question is, apart from the professional contribution the institutions have in societies, which likes of Prof. Mokgalong have been students here, likes of Mr. Homison have been students here, and professionally they're doing good. The academic space, how is the academic space contributing effectively to the broader societies? Looking at, number one, there are many factors that contributed to students, many learners not being part of the UL society. It might be systematic, maybe they didn't get quality APS since UL takes bachelors only. But also, how is the writings that we have here, the terminologies we have, the big English that we write here, go and contribute to the society? What is the bridge there? How do we contribute the researches we make here and the conclusions we make here in trying to solve the challenges of the broader societies? Including also, many people cannot read. If they can read, they cannot read to comprehend. If they can read to comprehend, they can interpret. If they can interpret, they can apply the kind of research they have read. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. I think Kukuni and Ndade read my mind, because I was also going towards that direction as well, to say, even in this project, we need to think as to how are we going to unbundle this academic work to be for the communities to be able to consume it, because part of the colonial mentality is to make universities to exist as ivory towers, as places that are not there for certain people who are in our societies. And those people are our working libraries, which we get more information when we do oral interviews with them and all that. So in this project, please, as a comment, just perhaps let us think of a feasible way of unpacking this particular thing so that they can be consumed in Ramakanye, in the surrounding villages and so forth and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think now we are concluding by our discussants taking the two questions or the comments. Prof. Mokgalong will take one and then conclude your part, Prof. If Professor Badat also come to the stage to conclude so that we can go to the next.
Right. Thank you. The unbundling of this and making it accessible to the community, Saleem, can I leave that to you? We will deal with it. A university is a catalyst for development. I don't think there's any example you can look at in South Africa other than the University of Limpopo. The reason I'm saying this is when you go out through gate 3, when I was a first year student here, there was nothing there. Absolutely nothing. You go through gate 2, there was a small shop there where Shell Garage is. You go through gate 1, there was nothing, because I remember one day we were chased by police. I ended up on that copy there. Yeah, there's one thing I can do. I can run away from them. Now, when you look at it today, truth be told, all the development you see around here, if you people were not here, if students were not here, it wouldn't be there. That's how communities around universities develop. Thanks to NSFAS for what it is. I normally phone the mayor of Polokwane, Mr. John Mpe. I remember one day saying to John, at 12 midnight, I will be releasing 12 million rands into the economy of Mankweng. That's how we develop it. If the university was not there, Malaneng wouldn't be there. Now, think of the number of families which are benefiting from that. Development in the university. You just one day for your own sake, go to gate 2 at about 7 in the morning. See the number of people who are walking through into the university because they're employed here. Had the university not been there, where would those people be employed? So all this development around, I mean, gate 1 is something else. Massive structures which are coming up there, all because of you. So that's the influence which the university has around the community here. They might not accept it, but it's for you to preach to them and tell them, you are who you are because of us.
So I think it's very important to make the point that, I mean, I think your question is still valid, right? Well, what does the university contribute to society? But I think we must start from the point that its mere existence actually is part of development. So like Rhodes University is the single biggest employer in the whole of Makanda. Rhodes University contributes 65% of the GDP of Makanda. Rhodes University is the single biggest consumer of electricity, but it also puts out a lot of sewage, right? So if Rhodes did not have a relationship with that municipality, it may not survive. I was saying to him that I had to lead a march to the municipality because the next day we would have had to close the university because of no water. Can you imagine what the toilets were like? And Rhodes is the most highly residential university in the country, with almost 60% of its students in residences. Small, it's 8,000, right? So the mere fact of it being there, you cannot imagine the economy. And at that time, Rhodes workers were the best paid in Makanda and at any university, right? Because that's the kind of institution Rhodes was. So it was, no one working at the Pick and Pay, Checkers and all that could better the salaries that Rhodes workers were getting and so on, right? So that's the first reality. But then your question is still important. So so I don't really think myself that many people have an ivory tower conception of universities. I just think that's a myth. The university is connected to society in so many ways, whether you like it or not. You cannot imagine yourself as an ivory tower, i.e. removed, right? So, but your question still remains. And then again, I think to use the term your VC said, you can't be all things to all people. You have to know what you cannot go and fix the schools. These are professors. I would be worried if all of them are spending 3 hours going and teaching maths at schools, because they've got other work to do with you. So we have to be sensible about some of those things. We cannot fix the problems of the society because we are a functioning institution. The Department of Education must have to fix schools. We can contribute through our teachers and the teacher training and partnerships and community engagement. So we also must know the limits of what we can change and contribute, because then we won't be a university anymore. Universities do some things. Hospitals do other things. The state does other things. We can't substitute for the state, right? So always we have to ask, what do we contribute, but what is sensible also in terms of our fundamental purposes, which is teaching and learning, producing new graduates, research of all kinds, basic, applied. I will defend basic research, eh? You can't do some applied research if you don't do basic research first, right? Theoretical research and so on. How do we even do this project without having a sense of a theory behind this or a concept behind this, right? So, this is what makes university so exciting. You know, we have to ask ourselves questions all the time. What are we? How do we contribute? Where are we at this point in time in 2024? And so on and so on. Right? But some of the ideas I'm hearing about how you could link a trail and so on, those are exciting. I don't think that exists in many institutions. So here's my dream, if you like, right? Hopefully one day, somewhere when you've discussed it, you will have some section in the university where people can come and you can portray your history with photographs and so on. When the parents bring the students and drop them off at the beginning of the year, you should be organizing tours to say, this is our history. Starts in 59 and this is where we are today, right? If you have a trail, you take them on the trail. When new academic staff come here, as part of your induction, you take them to the museum and say, you better know this institution, this is not UCT or Rhodes. It should be part of your induction. Induction shouldn't be about how to fill in the claim forms only. The induction should be about what is a university in the first place and what is this university that you are joining, because it's not Rhodes or UCT and so on. Right? So that kind of museum or trails can play really important roles. The first year welcome to students, put them as part of the orientation program onto that trail, take them to the museum so they understand this place and so on. Right? So lots of good things can come from it.
Thank you, Prof. Prof. Mokgalong and Professor Badat, as we conclude, because I need to call on to the stage Professor Stolle to wrap up, I think it will be very, before you leave, Prof, it's not seldom that one gets to tell the VC to sit down. Yeah, it's not often that one has to do that. To say that it will be really missing the point if I cannot indicate that, you know, this particular event is happening at the university where the motto is finding solutions for Africa. And also it links quite perfectly with the issue of heritage and relevance. Because the university has a heritage of producing leaders. It has a heritage of really going out to communities in terms of community engagement. So I think you did quite a great job, both of you, in terms of taking us through the paces with regard to this particular subject. And I want those online and those in here for a big round of applause for Professor Mokgalong and Professor Badat as we allow them to take the stage. Professor Stolle, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, and the moderation process, our discussants, the VC and Professor Badat. I think another round of applause. We millimetering towards the end, and I've got two announcements. And after these two announcements, I'll just disappear. You'll never see me until the other phase. The first announcement is that the second session will start in this building, in this very hall, at 14:30. And the purpose of the session is for those who would like to contribute chapters or contribute to the project in whatever way. 14:30 on the dot right here. And secondly, immediately after the vote of thanks, I think lunch will be served at the cafeteria, staff cafeteria, immediately hereafter. Thank you. Round of applause for the moderator, for the chairperson.
Just to remind all of us that the month is August. That's Women's Month. And on behalf of all women, my job is just so simple: just to say two little words, not the old two little words. The new two little words is thank you to the discussants. Prof. Mokgalong, I heard it very well, decolonization, Mokgaditsi. And Prof. Badat, thank you. Both of you, we heard you very well. And we are so thankful for sharing the knowledge, your wisdom, and provoking us to act. And we are going to act. All we can say to the coordinator, you mentioned there should be a coordinator. And I listened very carefully. The name of Prof. Twala was said more than 5 times. You asked me a question, in what speciality are you? That's the reason why I was able to count the number of times Prof. Twala was called. Prof. Twala, all we can say to you is that Mnyamande, Shivagati waka laswela, Ntsiva engena imbodo, Lukambuli, Lunzi. You are going to lead the team, and the project must be the reality. I also heard the name of Prof. Mokgalong. Don't forget Dr. Vuma and the students. Come next year, the first question you have to respond to is how many students are registered also take part in the project. So be ready as the coordinator. Nkomo, Mdau, Nduma, Shingwala Msinda. Thank you. To all of us, professors, academics, support staff include marketing and all. 2 little words. Thank you for being there to make this executive dialogue what it is. Thank you all. Don't forget, there are universities in South Africa, but they are not South African universities. Good things come to those who are first. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy lunch.